Well, hello, and welcome to Fun with Finance. I'm Bill Schroer, and this is session number 6. Now, session number 6 is actually going to deal with principle number 13 in your book, which has to do with budgeting. And those of you who are loyal followers of this program will know that we've covered budgets once already. But we're going to take another run at it and maybe hit it from a little bit different angle, because it's been my experience, and perhaps yours as well, that actually people don't like doing budgets. People hate doing budgets. As a matter of fact, if you mention the word budget, people run screaming from the room. And I'm going to encourage you to take a different view of budgets today. I'd like you to see them as a plan, a financial plan. And in fact, traditionally, in corporations, the CFO or Chief Financial Officer, that was often the path to becoming the CEO, because finance, budgeting, and managing the money of the corporation was considered so critical to the overall success of the organization. Well, that's still true today, although there's many paths to becoming a CEO. But I want to get back to the notion of budgets and talk about why people don't like to do budgets, why they have such a bad name, and what I can do to persuade you that a budget is actually a good idea. Now I'm going to flash up on the screen an example of a budget that we've used to demonstrate what a sample budget might look like, and we'll be going back and forth to this sheet as we go through the program. But I want to get back to the point of why people don't do budgets. First of all, a lot of folks don't see the connection between doing a budget and managing their money or having a positive financial outcome. Another reason why people don't do budgets is it's frankly a certain amount of work. You have to put a certain amount of thought into it, and it's like a lot of other things. The more work and care you put into it, the better product you're going to get. A third reason is they don't know how, and we're going to certainly try and address that this time. Or it may be that they did one once and they put it in a drawer and never used it, and now they can't see the point of doing it again. And again, I'm going to try and persuade you that there's lots of reasons why you want to do it. Another reason might be that folks just don't know what to do with it once they have it. And maybe the biggest reason of all is they just don't want to. And that can be a persuading argument in and of itself. All right. Well, let's talk about why it is that you'd want to do a budget, or what the actionability of a budget might be. First of all, the point is that you have a plan to follow. It enables you to have a guideline so that you're not simply looking at, what we might call the shiny object syndrome. You've got a certain amount of money in your pocket, and the first thing that comes along that seems attractive to you, you just pull out your wallet or your purse and you buy it. Well, a budget can help you prevent the shiny object syndrome from taking over your money. Another issue is that you can hold yourself accountable to your budget. You can say, I said I was going to spend only $20 on movies this month, and I'm pretty close to that, so I'm going to find some other things to do so I don't go over my authorized spending level. Another, and probably one of the most valuable component parts of a budget, is that you actually have a track of what you're spending money on, so that over time you can get more accurate in actually laying out your budget numbers. Another reason why you want to do a budget is that as you enter your actual data points compared with your estimates, you find how close you were to your projections. And oftentimes this is one of the really critical values of a budget, is that you learn over time how to get more and more accurate, because you see how far off you were and you start to narrow that gap. So you get better and better in budgeting, and of course that's one of the key things that you work up the learning curve by doing. Another benefit is that there may be a category of expenses you forgot to list on your budget when you put in your actuals at the end of the month, you find that you don't have a place to put a certain category of spending. This is an opportunity to modify your budget, and again, over time, your budget becomes more accurate, more detailed, and allows you to really do a much better job projecting what your spending is going to be. Another benefit of doing a budget on a regular basis is it allows you to show exactly where your savings. Remember, our goal is to save 20%, live below our means and save 20%. This shows you where the savings occurs in your budget, so you make sure you've got that plugged in each month, and ensures that you're not forgetting to incorporate your savings into your budget plan. There's probably some other reasons, one of which is that over time, what you find is that you can tell trend lines. So over the course of measuring your budget over the course of 2 or 3 years, you see that you're spending more or less on certain categories, and this enables you to get smarter about whether you want to continue to spend more. Say you're spending a certain amount on clothing or a certain amount on video games, and you see that number going up, and you really didn't realize that was happening. This is an opportunity for you to check your spending levels and to make sure that you're holding yourself accountable for the spending that you want to engage in. Okay, well let's talk about why budgets fail. There's a number of reasons why budgets fail. First of all, people often don't do a good job of constructing the budget in the first place, and so it tends not to be very workable. Another reason is that actuals deviate too much from estimates. Now, this is going to happen in the beginning, as I've indicated, but over time, if you work at it, your actuals will come closer in line with your estimates, or conversely, your estimates will get closer to what you're actually spending, and so you'll have a more accurate track. And this way, the budget will be successful as a useful document for you. And if you fail to follow the budget, that doesn't mean the budget's failed. It just means that you are not following along with what you'd set up to do. So in this case, you need to check to see whether or not you're serious about really holding your spending under control of a budget document. And lastly, sometimes emergencies occur and you have to spend outside of what you'd normally budgeted for. Well, this tells us two things. Number one, it's good to have an unplanned or emergency spending line item in your budget. And number two, if things happen and you have to spend outside your budget, you can recuperate over time and get back on track. That's no reason to throw out the budget. Well, let's move on and talk about exactly how we do a budget well. Within budgeting, in order to do a successful budget, one of the things that folks often don't take into consideration is what I'm going to call assumptions. Now, we're going to start with income assumptions, but the fact is, in budgets, it's not the numbers that are wrong, it's oftentimes the underlying assumptions where the numbers come from that are problematic. And so what I want you to do when you build your budget is I want you to go and lay in your assumptions behind the number that's on the budget line item. So for example, let's say your income is estimated to be $400 a month. And we then look at your assumption, and your assumption is that you've got a reliable job that routinely pays you $100 a week or $400 a month. In this case, you can be pretty comfortable that that $400 number is a good, reliable number that you can count on. Let's say, for example, in our next line item, that you sometimes pick up groceries for a neighbor twice a month, sometimes not twice a month. So you estimate, and you're being paid $20 each time, but you estimate that over time you're averaging really only about one pickup of groceries per month. And so you estimate the probability at 50%, and you plug in $20, which is one pickup per month, not two, because over time you've seen that you really don't have two pickups a month. So in this case, your assumption is helping to guide your number. And by the way, the probability which makes up that assumption is very, very important, and we'll talk more about that. Finally, in the third item, you've got an allowance. For example, and you say that you're averaging about $50 a month on allowance, and so you can reliably, hopefully, plug that number in. Let's look at the expense side. As I said, let's take a look at the spending side. Same situation needs to apply here. We need to apply the assumptions on the spending side. The example I'm sharing with you is that last year you spent about $30 a month on clothing. Well, let's say, for example, that you believe this year you're going to need to spend more on clothing. So you factor in an increase of 25% per month, which gives you a $38 per month allowance on clothing, up from the $30. And so in this case, you are benefiting from the learning of knowing how much you spent per month last year, and you're considering the fact that you've got to have a little bit more money to spend on clothing this year in order to meet your clothing requirements. In the next example, you can see that bus fare is routinely $25 a month, and so you're targeting exactly the $25, and you plug that in. Our final assumption is that your cell phone bill, which may have been running higher, is now going to drop down to $50 per month because your cell phone, which is several years old, but you paid it off, is now, your cell phone contract now only calls for $50 a month. And of course, this is another reason why you want to keep things after they're paid off, because now you're no longer paying for the phone, but you're still benefiting from the fact that you've got a working device. And keep that in mind as another way to take some savings and plug those into your investment account rather than spending them on a new phone. So once again, I'm sharing with you a template for a budget. This is not the only kind of template you can use, but I'm going to suggest that you try it. I'm providing some categories for income and some categories for expenses, but you can modify these. These are totally up to you. They need to be configured to fit your lifestyle and the way in which you both generate money and the way in which you spend money. So you'll need to work this out for you. Don't worry about being too detailed or having too many categories. You can always consolidate those later. It's better to have more detail in the beginning, and then as some categories become unnecessary, you can eliminate them. You want to plug in your estimates, and then each month, at the end of the month, you want to track your spending and put in your actuals. Now you'll notice near the bottom of the sheet, I've included some additional categories. Of course, your savings. As I talked a moment ago, I've plugged in a category for emergency spending, which you can keep that money each month, and then at the end of the year or end of a certain period of time, you can turn that over to either spend money on something you've been had on your wish list, or you can turn it into savings, which of course is my favorite.